Hello. Those of you that are a regular follower of our channel, you'll know that we harvested our cauliflower that was here last weekend, and that will give us lots of nice fresh cauliflower for the month of February. So what I'm just trying to do now is just to prep the bed ready for the spring sowings and plantings that we're to want to make. And of course, being no dig means that we need to spread a 1 to 2 inch layer of compost so that the soil life underneath can take the compost down, feed our soil, which will in turn feed the plants that we want to grow. And of course, for those of you that asked for a copy of our garden planner and garden veg calendar, you'll know that this is plot 1, and in plot 1 this is actually where we're going to be growing our potatoes. Now of course, if you're not no dig like us, you still need to be preparing your beds ready for your spring sowings and plantings. So long as the soil is not frozen and not waterlogged, when your plants yield their final harvests, you can take those out, start to turn your soil over and incorporate your compost. Now, in today's program, we shall be telling you our top tips for what you can be doing in the garden for the month of February. Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener. Now, February may be the shortest month of the year, but the weather tends to pack an awful lot into February. We can see wind and rain, snow and ice, sunshine and storms. And that's just in one day, but the days are starting to warm up, and they are ever so slowly starting to lengthen. That gives us an opportunity to get out into the garden and do more. And in February, there is plenty to be doing. Now, February is the last month to complete your winter pruning of your fruit trees. It's also the last chance you get to be pruning your soft fruit bushes, so things like black currants, red currants, gooseberries, and indeed your autumn fruiting raspberries. And you can see we've done ours, and you can go back and check that video out if you haven't seen that, if you're not quite sure what to do. But it's really simple with autumn fruiting raspberries. The canes just cut right down to the ground. February is also a good time to be planting any bare-rooted soft fruit bushes, including raspberries. And if you have put some new raspberry canes into the ground and they're up here a bit, you want to be pruning those down to about 12 inches from the ground. Now, if you're wondering why February represents the last window of opportunity to do any of this pruning, is because all of these fruit bushes and trees, they will now start to spring back into growth toward the end of February. So what February is also a good time to be doing is to mulch your raspberry canes in order that they can then be fed throughout the growing season. Before the season starts to ramp up and you're looking to sow lots of things, have a good check over your pots and trays to check for any overwintering and hibernating snails and slugs. There is one that's been hibernating. Or as my grandson likes to call them, turbos. Just by finding them, obviously they can't then go after your plants and attack them when you pop them in here, but also helps to diminish the population that you have in the garden. And February is also a good month to be planting rhubarb crowns. So if you don't have rhubarb in your garden yet, and it's a great thing to be growing in your garden or on your allotment, February is the month to be planting that out. But equally, if you already have rhubarb on your plot, you can also divide that up during the month of February to either give yourself more plants and to be able to grow more rhubarb for free, or of course you can give it away to your neighbours or your fellow plot holders so that they have some rhubarb to grow. Now, we talked earlier in the video about how the weather can be during the month of February. But should you see any of that white stuff, just ensure that you come out into the garden and just get it off your cloches, because the sheer weight of it will push that down and they'll collapse. And it could damage your plants. And as I've taken the trouble to have been growing these shallots and garlic since the end of September, beginning of October, I don't really want to lose them now. Now, we've seen quite a bit of wind just lately in the garden, and you can see by this cloche that we have over here, it's put it over to that side, and the wind often does come this way across our garden. But not only does it affect the cloche, but windrock also affects your plants. And if you look at this one here, you can see it's leant right over. So what you want to be able to do is to heel that back in, and when we finish filming, I'm actually going to get this one a bit more upright and just make sure that that stake is in there nice and firmly. And you want to be doing that if we do have a particularly windy month, and indeed also if we get a frost, because frost will also often lift your plants, and you just want to heel them back in with the heel of your foot. At the moment, thankfully, it's not been as bad as it was last year. I remember filming last February. We came out here, was a storm Duncan? Storm
Eunice, I think.
Eunice, something like that, wasn't it?
It was Eunice that we lost the polytunnel to.
Yeah, wrecked the polytunnel. All of the sprouts had gone over, hadn't they, when we were filming in the greenhouse? So, yeah, touch wood. We're not going to see too much of that this February. Now, while we have got this cover up, the other thing you want to be doing is to, wherever possible, just be taking up any of these leaves and stalks that are falling off the plant. And indeed, if any are looking really sort of not in great condition on the plant, you can take those off too. There's no need to really keep them. There's plenty of greenery on here. And it also just serves as a reminder that although in December we saw -10s, in January we saw -6s and 8s, these plants are still doing really well. And if Mrs. W just goes around there, you'll see that they are actually still giving us lovely purple sprouting broccoli to eat. Now, we learned quite a lot last year during our series that we did about jobs for the month. Because the one thing you guys are really good at is leaving us comments in the comments down below and telling us the jobs that you were doing during any particular month. And as I said, during January, I've gone back through those comments and collated all of those, so we like to add those into our top tips for the coming months. Sometimes we probably won't have said something because we either don't grow it or we don't have what people are talking about. And this is another good example, but equally a really, really good top tip. Now, if you are growing outdoor peaches or nectarines, we could obviously get frost during the month of February. And if they're forecast, then you need to fleece and wrap those plants up in order to protect the blossom. Now, another great tip that somebody sent in as a comment was about ponds. Now, we don't have a pond in our garden, although it's something that Mrs. W would like us to address at some point. So you'll probably see that over the coming years. Anyway, if you do have a pond in your garden, no matter how big or how small, February is a good time to actually clear any leaves or debris that are collating around the margins of the pond, because all the wildlife is going to start waking up during February and needing access to your pond or your water. Also, if you have got quite a large pond, a lot of people do net them over the autumn period so that the leaves are collected in the net. Again, February, good time now of the year to actually remove that net now so that the wildlife can get into the pond as and when it needs to. I really do hope that the camera microphone is actually picking up the wonderful sound of those birds chirping, tweeting, whistling. Now, birds can often be your best friend at this time of the year. Actually, they're our best friends all through the year.
Apart from pigeons.
Apart from pigeons, Mrs. W, you're quite right. But they don't tend to make lovely noises like that, do they? Now, one of the things that we like to do, and I think is a really good tip for you guys, regardless whether you grow your vegetables in a garden or on your allotment, is to make what we call fat balls and dot them about and hang them in the garden, because that will encourage the birds into your garden to come and get something to eat. And if you can encourage birds into your garden by going after the fat balls for something to eat, they will actually also go after a lot of the pests that will ultimately go after your plants that you put into the ground in the spring. Will they get rid of them all? No, probably not. But if they can cut the population of the pests in your soil by a quarter, that's a quarter of the job done for this year. Now, for many people, February is a month to begin chitting your potatoes. You often hear me talk about which zone you garden in. One of the most important things for knowing that is to know what your climate is like and when your first and last frost date on average will happen. So we garden here in zone 9A, and that means that our average last frost date is around April the 14th, somewhere between the 14th and 18th. So if we count back 4 weeks from there, then mid-March is when we can put our potatoes out into the ground. In that way, when they break the surface in 4 to 5 weeks' time, we should have passed our last average frost date. It doesn't mean to say that you won't get a frost after that. We all get caught once in a while, but they will only have just broken through the surface. And so if a frost is forecast, we can just fleece them over and protect them. So if we want to plant these out in mid-March, then this weekend, which is the first weekend of February, is the time when we need to start chitting our potatoes. Why? Simply because they're going to take 4 to 5 weeks to get to the sort of 2.5 centimetre length that we sort of need to be able to plant those into the ground, or indeed even into your tubs. Now, many people ask me, should I chip my potatoes or shouldn't I? That is a personal matter down to you. You don't have to chip potatoes, they grow perfectly well without chitting them. What does slightly annoy me is when I hear people saying that if you're new to gardening, don't worry about chitting because it's too complicated. It's not complicated. If you chit your potatoes, you'll get them some 4 weeks earlier than you would normally. That's all it is. And all you have to do is to place these in a tray like so. You can see one end of the potato hardly has any eyes and no chits. The other end has plenty. And all you do is stand them upright in a box like that. 4 weeks or 5 weeks before you want to plant them. Then all you do is plant them. It's as simple as that. And the choice is entirely yours. So, they are our top tips for things to be doing in the garden in February. Now, if you have seen a little bit of smoke sometimes in the video, it's because we've been having a bit of a bonfire in the garden. It does feel a lot warmer today. The wind has dropped quite nicely. So we were out here actually, we were up and about 7:30, was it? And we thought, yep, it's an ideal time to actually, some of the things that we've collected and we need to get rid of, we can actually start a fire off and, yeah, all nice and done. And it is quite lovely when you do have a fire. February I always find is a time, for us anyway, as gardeners, I think it's renewal time. We're renewing the beds, ready to receive the spring plantings and sowings. The lawns have actually been clipped and we're just straightening everything up and everything's starting to start looking tidy again and where we want it, so that we're ready to go when spring arrives. And it's not so far away. What are we now? Is it the 4th of February today this is being filmed on? Another 6 to 8 weeks. Spring's going to be upon us. And we're going to get really busy then sowing and planting. Now, in February, there is also quite a few more seeds that can actually be sown. But we'll tell you all about that in our next video. And if you want to be following along with us in any shape or form, and you want to see where we're going to be planting things, and when we're going to be sowing things, then drop us an email and we can send you a copy of our garden planner and our veg planner. Many of you have taken the opportunity to do so, and I hope that you do find it helpful. It is fully editable, so you can change the names of the plants to yours, and depending on what zone you grow things in, so once you know your last and first frost date, you can amend that calendar as to when you need to be sowing your seeds and planting out your vegetables. We shall see you next time.